Is this real? With a bullet.
So it's a fucking coin toss? That's what 50 billion.
Get in the car and just start driving.
Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
A House of Dynamite begins not with a spectacle but with an almost imperceptible tension that pervades the mundane, everyday operations of national security monitoring. The opening sequence immerses the audience in a world where vigilance is constant and the mechanisms of defense are intricate and almost invisible to the layperson. A dimly lit control room hums with the low buzz of electronics, blinking monitors display telemetry, and radar operators scan the skies with a quiet, relentless intensity. Catherine Bigelow's camera lingers on small gestures, the subtle tightening of a jaw, the rapid flick of eyes across data streams, the micro-adjustments of hands over keyboards. This deliberate focus establishes the film's central preoccupation. In the era of technological sophistication, the smallest human action or hesitation can have consequences that ripple far beyond the immediate environment. From the outset, the audience is made aware that this is a film deeply concerned with perception, interpretation, and human fallibility. The script by Noah Oppenheim constructs a multi-layered narrative that emphasizes the multiplicity of perspective, portraying the same high-stakes event, the detection of a potentially nuclear missile, through three distinct lenses. The first perspective, which might be called inclination is flattening, introduces viewers to the highest echelons of political authority. Here, the audience encounters President Idris Elba, a figure whose external composure belies the turbulent emotions beneath. He is a man tasked with bearing the weight of national and global responsibility, navigating a labyrinth of procedural expectation, political optics, and private moral deliberation. Early sequences juxtapose his formal duties, press briefings, strategic meetings, ceremonial obligations, with intimate glimpses of private reflection, revealing a layered character whose inner conflict is inseparable from the public demands placed upon him. The political narrative establishes a tone of moral ambiguity. Advisors present conflicting intelligence, systems provide data that is precise yet incomplete, and the mechanisms of bureaucratic deliberation move at a pace both rapid and agonizingly slow. Every meeting, every consultation, becomes a stage upon which the tension between human judgment and institutional protocol is enacted. The president must navigate this landscape with caution, balancing trust and skepticism, personal intuition and statistical analysis, and decisiveness with measured restraint. Bigelow emphasizes that the weight of leadership in moments of existential crisis is as much a psychological challenge as it is a procedural one, framing scenes with careful attention to spatial composition and the subtle signaling of authority and uncertainty among participants. Parallel to this, the military perspective, embodied by Captain Olivia Walker and her colleagues, provides a procedural counterpoint. These sequences immerse the audience in the technical rigor of missile defense operations, from early warning radars to satellite telemetry to the precise timing required to engage interceptors. Rebecca Ferguson's performance is understated yet potent. Her disciplined demeanor conveys both competence and an acute awareness of the ethical dimensions of her role. Walker's arc reflects the tension between adherence to protocol and the moral implications of action. Every calculation, every transmission, carries with it the potential to escalate or contain catastrophe. Bigelow's direction underscores the psychological strain of operating within a high-pressure system where milliseconds can dictate life or death. The film's third perspective, A House Filled with Dynamite, returns to the intersection of personal grief and institutional responsibility, focusing on Secretary of Defense Reed Baker. Jared Harris brings depth and humanity to this role, portraying a man simultaneously grounded in professional experience and destabilized by personal loss. The interplay between Baker and the president illustrates one of the film's central themes, the human dimension of global decision-making. Each choice is informed not only by data and procedure but by the emotional and psychological states of those in power. Baker's grief and reflective moments are seamlessly integrated into high-tension decision-making scenarios, reminding the audience that even the most rational, disciplined actors are shaped by their personal histories and vulnerabilities. Symbolism is woven throughout these narrative strands. The missile itself operates on both literal and metaphorical levels, representing the intersection of human fallibility, technological capability, and geopolitical tension. Control rooms and corridors function as visual metaphors for constrained choice, the narrow spaces emphasizing the limited options available to decision-makers in moments of extreme pressure. Lighting, color palette, and framing are deployed with purpose: harsh fluorescence in operational environments, warm ambient light in private spaces, and stark contrasts to underscore the duality between professional facade and internal emotion. Bigelow's aesthetic choices reinforce the central tension between system and individual, machinery and morality, immediacy and deliberation. Musical scoring by Volker Bertelmann complements the visual and narrative strategies. Sparse instrumentation, low-frequency pulses, and intermittent electronic motifs echo the anxiety inherent in high-stakes operations. The score mimics physiological responses, heartbeats, the rush of adrenaline, and the steady march of time, reinforcing the audience's immersive experience. These auditory cues, combined with the diegetic sounds of consoles, alarms, and human breath, construct a visceral atmosphere in which suspense emerges organically from the narrative itself. Character development is central to the film's emotional resonance. President Elba evolves through the course of the narrative, confronting moral dilemmas that challenge the boundaries between political expediency and ethical responsibility. Ferguson's Walker exemplifies the embodiment of procedural integrity under pressure, revealing the psychological cost of maintaining composure and precision amidst uncertainty. Harris's Baker presents a study in human vulnerability intersecting with professional duty, portraying how grief and personal reflection influence high-stakes strategic decisions. Supporting characters, including Gabriel Basso, Tracy Letts, Greta Lee, Moses Ingram, Anthony Ramos, Jonah Hauer-King, and Jason Clarke, populate the film with nuanced perspectives, emphasizing that the crisis is both collective and deeply individual. Beyond the immediate tension of the missile crisis, A House of Dynamite also explores the broader geopolitical context in which such a threat might emerge, grounding its narrative in plausible international relations and strategic calculations. While the film does not explicitly identify the source of the missile, it evokes real-world anxieties regarding global nuclear powers, the fragility of international diplomacy, and the potential consequences of miscommunication or miscalculation. This ambiguity serves a dual purpose: it heightens suspense while prompting reflection on the interconnected nature of global security and the difficulty of assigning blame in complex geopolitical environments. By leaving certain questions unanswered, Bigelow encourages audiences to engage with the scenario intellectually, imagining the potential ripple effects of each decision and the ethical dilemmas faced by leaders who must respond without complete information. The film's attention to realism extends to the portrayal of military procedures and governmental operations. Advisors and strategists operate within established protocols, consulting intelligence reports, running simulations, and assessing various courses of action. The depiction of the command chain, emergency management protocols, and communication networks reflects extensive research and consultation with experts, resulting in a narrative that feels both grounded and plausible. Through these procedural details, viewers gain insight into the rigorous, high-stakes environment in which critical decisions are made, as well as the cognitive and emotional demands placed upon those tasked with safeguarding national security. The film thereby offers both a dramatic experience and an educational lens into the operational realities of crisis management at the highest level. Character dynamics play a crucial role in sustaining tension and engagement. The interplay between Captain Olivia Walker, General Anthony Brady, and the President demonstrates how differing priorities, worldviews, and personal biases can influence the decision-making process. Walker's analytical and cautious approach contrasts with Brady's assertive and sometimes impulsive methodology, while the President must navigate the delicate balance between listening to expert advice and exercising independent judgment. These interactions reveal not only the logistical challenges of crisis management but also the psychological complexity of leadership under pressure. The narrative emphasizes the moral responsibility inherent in positions of power, illustrating that decisions made in moments of high stakes carry ramifications that extend far beyond the immediate crisis. The supporting characters, while not always in the spotlight, provide critical depth and context to the story. Figures such as Jake Barrington, Secretary Reed Baker, Major Gonzalez, and Kathy Rogers illustrate the collaborative nature of governance and emergency response. Each brings specialized expertise to the table: intelligence analysis, strategic planning, operational coordination, and civilian management, highlighting how diverse skills and perspectives converge to address existential threats. Their interactions further underscore the ethical and practical challenges of coordinating a multifaceted response, emphasizing that successful crisis management depends not only on individual competence but also on the ability to navigate interpersonal dynamics and competing priorities. Technical aspects of the film, particularly cinematography and sound design, play an integral role in shaping audience experience. Barry Ackroyd's use of handheld camera work and strategic framing conveys both immediacy and tension, allowing viewers to feel embedded within the unfolding crisis. Close-up shots capture minute expressions, revealing the emotional weight carried by the characters, while wider angles establish the operational complexity and interconnectivity of the various actors involved. Kirk Baxter's editing ensures that the film's looping narrative structure remains coherent and compelling, guiding the audience through overlapping timelines without confusion. Volker Bertelmann's score complements these visual elements, using a blend of subdued, atmospheric motifs and dramatic crescendos to mirror the psychological tension and narrative stakes, while Paul N. J. Ottison's sound design reinforces realism, from the mechanical precision of missile systems to the ambient hum of communication networks. The film's thematic exploration extends into philosophical territory, prompting contemplation of moral responsibility, human fallibility, and the nature of power. By presenting a scenario in which every decision carries potentially catastrophic consequences, A House of Dynamite challenges viewers to consider the ethical frameworks and cognitive processes that guide leadership. The narrative examines the paradox of nuclear deterrence, highlighting the tension between possessing instruments of mass destruction to prevent their use and the inherent risk of catastrophic misjudgment. The film's refusal to provide definitive answers regarding the missile's origin or the outcome of decisions reflects a commitment to exploring ambiguity, emphasizing that uncertainty and risk are intrinsic to both national security and human judgment. The performances of the lead actors are central to conveying these themes effectively. Rebecca Ferguson's portrayal of Olivia Walker captures the tension between analytical rigor and moral conscience, conveying a quiet intensity that anchors the narrative. Tracy Letts' depiction of General Brady emphasizes the psychological complexity of military leadership, balancing confidence with vulnerability and aggression with doubt. Idris Elba, as the president, embodies the ultimate burden of responsibility, navigating political, ethical, and emotional challenges with authority and gravitas. The nuanced performances of the supporting cast reinforce the realism and depth of the story, ensuring that even secondary characters are fully realized and contribute meaningfully to the narrative's thematic resonance. Production design and visual storytelling further enhance the immersive quality of the film. The Situation Room, military command centers, and field locations are meticulously constructed to reflect authenticity, with every detail, from screens and consoles to lighting and spatial arrangement, serving to immerse viewers in the operational realities of crisis management. The visual language of the film, including color palette, framing, and movement, supports the narrative's tension and thematic depth, reinforcing both the emotional and procedural stakes. Costume design, subtle yet precise, further distinguishes characters' roles, emphasizing hierarchy, professional responsibility, and the interplay between personal and institutional identity. The film's reception reflects its ambitious narrative and thematic scope. While critics and audiences praised its technical excellence, innovative structure, and thought-provoking exploration of leadership and moral responsibility, some viewers expressed frustration with the ambiguous ending. The decision to leave certain questions unanswered, particularly regarding the missile's origin and ultimate impact, was both a narrative and thematic choice, emphasizing uncertainty as an inherent aspect of modern crisis management and human judgment. This polarizing element sparked discussion and analysis, prompting viewers to engage with the film on intellectual and ethical levels, extending its impact beyond mere entertainment. In terms of marketing and distribution, the film was positioned as both a high-stakes thriller and a thoughtful exploration of leadership and moral responsibility. The premiere at the Venice International Film Festival, followed by limited theatrical releases in the United States and the United Kingdom and a global Netflix streaming release, maximized both prestige and accessibility. Teasers and trailers emphasize the immediacy of the crisis, the procedural intensity of the White House and military operations, and the psychological stakes faced by the characters, generating anticipation and discussion among audiences worldwide. This strategic combination of festival recognition, limited theatrical exposure, and streaming availability ensured that the film reached a diverse and engaged audience. The film's opening sequence deserves close attention, as it sets both the aesthetic and thematic tone for the entire narrative. The camera lingers on an aerial shot of Washington, D.C., at dawn, capturing the city in its deceptive tranquility. This tranquility is immediately contrasted with close-ups of analysts and intelligence officers arriving at the Situation Room. The slow, deliberate pacing of these shots signals to the audience that this is a world where precision, observation, and anticipation are paramount. Small details, the way Walker arranges her notes, the way Gonzalez checks his instruments, the quiet hum of servers in the background, convey a universe in which vigilance is both a duty and a psychological burden. In this manner, the film establishes a pattern that persists throughout, the juxtaposition of human intimacy and institutional rigor, the personal and the procedural, the visible and the invisible forces shaping events. The first missile detection sequence is meticulously constructed to maximize tension while remaining plausible. The sea-based X-band radar detects an anomaly, a trajectory that defies prediction and bypasses standard early warning patterns. The blip appears on the radar screen as a barely perceptible dot, but its implications reverberate through multiple narrative layers. Walker's reaction is understated but laden with meaning. She recognizes the significance immediately, and the camera captures this through a series of tight shots on her eyes and subtle facial cues. The intercutting between the Situation Room, Gonzalez's remote missile base, and the radar station emphasizes simultaneity, portraying how a single event ripples across vast distances and organizational hierarchies. The editing here is particularly noteworthy. By pacing each cut to match rising anxiety, Baxter ensures that the audience experiences the same disorientation and urgency as the characters themselves. Major Gonzalez's personal arc is threaded through the operational crisis, providing a human counterpoint to the procedural tension. Early in the narrative, we see him perform mundane routines at Fort Greely, inspections, drills, communication checks, but each of these routines is colored by latent anxiety. Ramos's portrayal emphasizes micro-expressions, a furrowed brow, a sudden pause in speech, a clenched jaw. These details convey that Gonzalez is not merely a military actor but a human being aware of the catastrophic potential of his responsibilities. His attempts to connect with his daughter through unsent messages underscore the theme of personal sacrifice, highlighting the emotional cost of duty in the modern military. The film repeatedly returns to Gonzalez's isolation in the vast Alaskan landscape, using the environment as a visual metaphor for both physical and psychological remoteness. Snowfields, barren ridges, and frigid winds mirror the emotional desolation imposed by responsibility and uncertainty. Meanwhile, the second narrative perspective introduces a more cerebral tension, focusing on intelligence analysis, political debate, and bureaucratic conflict. General Brady embodies the traditional mindset of decisive, action-oriented leadership, while Anna Park represents caution and contextual awareness. The dialogue between these characters is rich with technical detail and strategic nuance. Viewers are immersed in discussions of launch vectors, missile interception probabilities, and international signaling, conversations that are accessible yet grounded in reality. This careful balance ensures the audience is intellectually engaged, understanding the stakes without feeling lost in technobabble. The narrative emphasizes that decisions at this level are not simply mechanical, they are profoundly human, shaped by interpretation, bias, and ethical considerations. The tension arises not from physical danger alone but from the cognitive and moral pressures of acting under uncertainty. The film also integrates the psychological burden of leadership into the narrative architecture. The president's perspective illustrates the weight of ultimate authority, as decisions about retaliation, communication, and civilian safety fall squarely on his shoulders. Elba's performance conveys both command and vulnerability. In one striking sequence, he receives word of the missile while interacting with children at a basketball clinic, a symbolic juxtaposition of innocence and danger. The intrusion of existential threat into ordinary life reinforces the film's central metaphor: modern society exists in a precarious balance, where the ordinary and the catastrophic coexist uneasily. The president's deliberations over the nuclear football illustrate the procedural rigor of high-stakes decision-making while highlighting its emotional toll. The tension between protocol and personal morality is evident in every gesture, every pause, every consultative exchange. Secretary of Defense Reed Baker's arc provides another layer of thematic richness. His grief over personal loss is mirrored in his professional dilemmas, creating a duality of emotional and operational pressure. Harris's performance captures subtle internal conflicts, the hesitation before authorizing certain procedures, the quiet moments of reflection, the moral questioning of orders that could precipitate mass destruction. His eventual decision to step away from evacuation and face a potential end is rendered with meticulous attention to visual and emotional detail. The rooftop sequence is emblematic of the film's focus on human vulnerability amid institutional mechanisms. The camera follows Baker with lingering, intimate shots, allowing the audience to inhabit his perspective, to feel the weight of his grief, and to understand the moral coherence of his final act. This sequence reinforces a core theme, that human cost is inseparable from high-level decision-making. A House of Dynamite also pays extraordinary attention to environmental and technological realism. The missile base, situation room, and radar station are depicted with intricate accuracy, reflecting consultations with military and intelligence experts. Each device, each protocol, each communication channel is rendered with plausibility, lending the film a documentary-like verisimilitude. This attention to detail extends to procedural practices, verification protocols, chain-of-command communication, authentication codes, and data analysis methods are depicted not as cinematic shorthand but as essential components of the narrative tension. By grounding suspense in technical accuracy, the film ensures that the stakes feel real, immediate, and credible. Cinematography and sound design work in tandem to reinforce thematic and emotional resonance. Aykroyd's handheld camera work, particularly in tight interiors, evokes immediacy and intimacy, while wide, static shots of landscapes and cityscapes situate human action within a broader, often indifferent environment. Bertelmann's score functions as psychological texture, reinforcing tension and uncertainty without resorting to conventional thriller clichés. The interplay of silence, environmental noise, and subtle electronic tones immerses the audience in a sensory environment that mirrors the narrative's intellectual and emotional stakes. In sequences depicting missile interception attempts, sound design conveys both technological precision and human anxiety, emphasizing the unpredictability inherent in complex systems. The film's geopolitical themes are woven throughout, emphasizing the ambiguity of international conflict and the precariousness of deterrence. By leaving the missile's origin unidentified, the narrative explores the dangers of misattribution and miscalculation in an interconnected global order. The film implicitly critiques binary narratives of enemy and ally, illustrating that decision-making under uncertainty often involves ethical trade-offs and moral risk. Characters must navigate incomplete information, conflicting intelligence, and the unpredictable behavior of other nations, highlighting the fragility of assumptions underpinning international security. These themes resonate with contemporary debates on nuclear proliferation, artificial intelligence in military applications, and the challenges of rapid response diplomacy. Moreover, the narrative interrogates human relationships as central to the functioning of complex systems. Personal connections, empathy, and communication are depicted as critical factors in high-stakes decision-making. Walker's interactions with colleagues, Gonzalez's messages to his daughter, the president's conversations with aides, all serve to humanize institutional processes and underscore the importance of trust, judgment, and ethical reflection. In this way, the film suggests that technological prowess alone is insufficient to navigate existential crises. Human moral reasoning and emotional resilience are equally essential. The overlapping perspectives, the polyphonic narrative structure, serve both aesthetic and conceptual purposes. By showing events from multiple viewpoints, the film emphasizes the partiality and subjectivity inherent in human perception and decision-making. Each perspective contributes unique information while withholding other elements, creating a sense of uncertainty and fragmentation. This narrative strategy mirrors real-world crises, where information is incomplete, priorities differ, and miscommunication can have catastrophic consequences. The audience is made to experience the simultaneity of events, the complexity of interpretation, and the moral weight of decisions that may affect millions. The film also engages in symbolic exploration. The missile itself functions as both a literal threat and a metaphor for systemic fragility, the unpredictability of technology, and the latent potential for catastrophe in modern society. The film's repeated emphasis on small, human gestures, the checking of codes, the unsent messages, the hesitant glances, contrasts with the massive scale of the threat, reinforcing a sense of vulnerability and the delicate balance of global stability. Even environmental elements, such as the harsh Alaskan landscape or the sterile interiors of government facilities, are charged with metaphorical meaning, representing isolation, exposure, and the cold logic of technological systems. In addition, the film's depiction of technology as both enabler and source of uncertainty is a recurring motif. Advanced missile defense systems, encrypted communications, and situational awareness dashboards are depicted with precision, yet their limitations are highlighted. Interceptors fail, communication lags, and analysis is subject to interpretation. This tension underscores a central thesis: human judgment remains the ultimate variable in a world dominated by high-stakes technological systems. The film argues that even in a society with unparalleled technological sophistication, error, ambiguity, and moral complexity are unavoidable. The morning sky over the Pacific was deceptive in its tranquility, the kind of calm that made the world feel steady and safe, as though nothing could disrupt the rhythm of ordinary life. For millions, it was a normal day, punctuated by commute alarms, the hum of office air conditioning, the clatter of keyboards. But for Captain Olivia Walker, stationed in the White House Situation Room, normalcy was a fragile illusion. The screens before her glowed with streams of data, satellites tracking the movement of ships, the subtle oscillations of global communication networks, and the occasional anomaly in defense telemetry. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced precision, but behind the motion was a tension she carried silently, a knowledge that at any moment, a flicker on a monitor could cascade into history-altering consequences. She paused, reading a report on North Korean communications that had gone silent. Her eyes narrowed. "It's quiet," she murmured, almost to herself. A subtle shift in her posture, an almost imperceptible tightening of her jaw, betrayed the inner calculation beginning to take shape. She toggled between feeds, cross-referencing Chinese military maneuvers near disputed waters, unusual radar reflections in the Indian Ocean, and alerts from allied networks. "Nothing confirms anything," she said softly. Her voice carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken possibilities. The world outside the room remained oblivious, but inside, a storm of probability and risk swirled with relentless precision. Across thousands of miles, in the frozen expanse of Fort Greely, Alaska, Major Daniel Gonzalez was already awake, moving among the consoles with a steady rhythm. The missile defense systems required continuous attention, even in the absence of immediate threat, but today would prove different. The screens flickered with activity, small anomalies in telemetry data that suggested something out of sequence. He leaned forward, hands hovering over the input panel. "Check the vector again," he commanded, his voice calm but threaded with tension. His officers responded with disciplined acknowledgement, their movements precise, rehearsed, almost ritualistic. They were not mere operators, they were guardians of a fragile line between safety and catastrophe. Every calculation mattered. Every second could determine life or death. And yet, even as he issued commands, Daniel's mind flickered to home, his daughter's laughter echoing from the phone's photo frame clipped to his console. A brief thought, almost forbidden, of what he was protecting, of the small, human lives tethered to the decisions he made here. Back in Washington, the Situation Room was becoming a hive of controlled urgency. Analysts, intelligence officers, and advisors shifted through reports, each interpreting fragments of data in their own professional lens. The president, portrayed with nuanced gravitas, entered the room, his presence commanding yet visibly weighed by the gravity of expectation. He scanned the reports, listening as his advisors briefed him on possibilities and probabilities, each laden with uncertainty. Reed Baker, Secretary of Defense, still grappling with the raw ache of personal loss, gave his analysis in a voice both firm and human, the kind of tone that betrayed grief even as it commanded attention. "The interceptors are not guaranteed," Reed said. "We've simulated similar scenarios, and success rates are inconsistent." His eyes met the president's. "We must consider escalation if we proceed without certainty." The president exhaled slowly. "Uncertainty is our constant companion," he said, almost philosophically, a hint of weariness in his tone. "But indecision may be worse." Meanwhile, Captain Walker's phone vibrated with a brief, innocuous message, a sibling checking in, unaware of the storm unfolding in real time. She glanced at it, a flicker of warmth breaking through her professional armor, before returning to the monitors. Even amid global crisis, the human need for connection persisted, reminding the audience that vulnerability and responsibility coexist, often uneasily, within the same person. As the radar arrays detected the unidentified missile, the room held a collective breath. Data cascaded across screens: velocity, trajectory, probable payload. Yet, like a riddle, each piece of information raised more questions than answers. Who launched it? Was it intentional, or a malfunction? Could interceptors engage in time? The audience, inhabiting Olivia's perspective, experienced each flicker of data as both revelation and tension, the uncertainty translating into palpable anxiety. Daniel Gonzalez's hands flew over his control panel, initiating a launch sequence for the interceptors. His crew followed with drilled precision, each movement choreographed yet emotionally charged. "Targeting vector locked," an officer announced. Daniel's eyes flicked to the display. The missile's path was now clearer but still not guaranteed. He leaned back slightly, whispering under his breath, come on," the hum of the system, the rhythmic beeping of telemetry, and the tense silence of the frozen base created a musical tension, a rhythm of anxiety and hope intertwined. The film intercuts to the president, who receives Olivia's updates in real time. Each message is not just data but the distilled judgment of a human being navigating uncertainty. He considers retaliation, restraint, and the moral implications of either. The ethical calculus is immense: a wrong move could ignite global conflict. Dialogue between advisors grows heated, voices overlapping as professional certainty clashes with personal doubt. The president absorbs the arguments, listening, questioning, and weighing the consequences. His internal monologue is unspoken but felt. The tension between action and inaction, between duty and human empathy, is nearly unbearable. Meanwhile, the missile approaches midcourse, and Gonzalez executes real-time corrections. Each adjustment carries profound implications. His thoughts flicker to his daughter again, imagining her safe at home, unaware of the world-altering events unfolding. He grips the edge of the console, knuckles whitening, as he balances hope with procedural rigor. "Trajectory stable," he murmurs, almost as a prayer. The interweaving of personal stakes with operational demands underscores the film's thematic core: human vulnerability within structured systems. The president receives word that interceptors have been launched. Success is partial. Uncertainty remains. The tension does not dissipate, it evolves. What is the right move next? Should the U.S. retaliate if the origin remains unknown? Should restraint be maintained at the risk of perceived weakness? The debate is not abstract, it is visceral, ethical, and intensely human. Advisors argue, counter, and plead, revealing personal biases, grief, and fear alongside technical expertise. The audience is immersed in the human complexity of decision-making at the edge of catastrophe. The film's narrative intentionally leaves some questions unresolved. The missile's origin is ambiguous, the full consequences remain unknown, and the geopolitical aftermath is only hinted at. Yet the emotional arcs are complete. Olivia experiences relief tempered with lingering fear, Gonzalez reconnects with the human stakes of his actions, and the president contemplates moral responsibility alongside political consequence. These endings, unorthodox in cinematic terms, underscore the film's commitment to realism and emotional truth. Throughout, Bigelow's direction and Barry Ackroyd's cinematography amplify the narrative's intensity. The hum of machinery, the flicker of screens, the sparse dialogue, and the subtle gestures of characters convey as much meaning as action sequences would in a conventional thriller. The audience experiences not only procedural accuracy but also the emotional and ethical weight of crisis, creating a fully immersive, contemplative, and viscerally intense experience. This ultra-cinematic style continues throughout the film, exploring the interplay of technical systems, human emotion, and moral decision-making. Characters' internal monologues, fleeting gestures, whispered thoughts, and paused glances all contribute to a rich, layered narrative that examines the fragility of global systems and the resilience of human judgment. Every sequence, whether in the Situation Room, at Fort Greely, or within the president's private quarters, is charged with tension, ethical complexity, and emotional resonance. As the narrative progresses, the tension escalates through a meticulously layered interplay of timing, perspective, and consequence. The film moves seamlessly between the political, military, and personal spheres, emphasizing how the same event, a detected missile, creates distinct pressures and dilemmas across different levels of authority. In the political arena, the president and his advisors are confronted with the limitations of their information. Data streams are incomplete, conflicting reports arrive almost simultaneously, and intelligence briefings emphasize probabilities rather than certainties. In these sequences, Bigelow's direction emphasizes the fragility of perception. A minor misinterpretation of technical data could provoke a catastrophic response. The audience becomes acutely aware that leadership, even at the highest levels, is a precarious balance between rational analysis and instinctive judgment. Captain Olivia Walker's story intersects with these political pressures, highlighting the human interface with technology. Scenes of missile trajectory calculations, communication logs, and interceptor guidance are detailed with painstaking accuracy, but Ferguson's performance ensures that these technical moments remain deeply human. The tension lies not only in achieving procedural success but in understanding the consequences of failure. Bigelow underscores that technological precision alone cannot prevent disaster. It is the judgment, emotional resilience, and moral compass of individuals like Walker that ultimately shape the outcomes of these high-stakes scenarios. Secondary characters enrich the narrative by embodying various facets of human reaction under stress. Analysts, operators, and junior officers demonstrate a spectrum of psychological responses, from near paralysis to hyper-focused execution. These portrayals serve to illustrate the human cost of living in a state of perpetual vigilance. Even minor errors, hesitations, or emotional lapses are amplified by the stakes, emphasizing that the film's suspense is not derived from external spectacle but from the internal pressures that govern decision-making. In the segment focusing on Secretary Baker, Bigelow delves deeper into the intersection of grief and duty. Baker's personal history, the recent death of his wife, is not treated as a narrative aside but as an essential lens through which his professional decisions are filtered. His grief manifests subtly, a paused glance at a photograph, a reflective gesture, or a fleeting expression of vulnerability during moments of intense deliberation. These human moments heighten the tension, reminding the audience that the calculus of global security is inseparable from the emotional and psychological state of the individuals executing it. The moral complexity of Baker's role becomes increasingly apparent as he grapples with choices that could escalate a single missile detection into global catastrophe. His interactions with the president reveal the delicate interplay of trust, expertise, and authority, emphasizing that even hierarchical structures rely on the nuanced judgment of their participants. Bigelow's cinematographic choices in these scenes reinforce thematic concerns. Close-up shots of faces, hands, and monitors emphasize the intimate nature of decision-making within a global-scale crisis. The use of shallow depth of field isolates characters within the frame, visually representing their concentration, pressure, and isolation. Lighting schemes differentiate environments. The harsh, clinical glow of operation centers contrasts with the softer, warmer tones of private spaces, visually reflecting the divide between public duty and personal reflection. These techniques, combined with editing that interweaves multiple perspectives, create a rhythmic tension that mirrors the narrative's escalating stakes. Dialogue throughout the film is equally purposeful. Conversations are dense with technical language, acronyms, and procedural detail, yet Oppenheim carefully ensures accessibility. The script balances realism with audience comprehension, allowing viewers to grasp the gravity of decisions without sacrificing authenticity. Exchanges between the president and his advisors oscillate between concise operational briefings and morally charged debates, highlighting the ethical dilemmas inherent in nuclear decision-making. Walker's communications with both the military command and political leadership illustrate the human dimension of procedural compliance, reinforcing the theme that individuals serve as conduits for the flow of information, judgment, and moral responsibility. The missile itself functions as a multi-layered symbol. Literally, it represents an imminent threat; metaphorically, it embodies uncertainty, human fallibility, and the destructive potential latent within systems designed to maintain order. Bigelow amplifies this symbolism through visual motifs, monitors displaying trajectory paths, countdown timers, and tracking interfaces recur throughout the film, reminding the audience of the temporal and ethical pressures under which characters operate. Even seemingly mundane objects, the precise configuration of keyboards, the orientation of monitors, and the movement of office chairs, are imbued with significance, reflecting the tightly constrained operational environment and the narrow margins within which humans must operate. The triptych narrative structure further reinforces thematic complexity. By showing the same event from three perspectives, the film encourages reflection on relativity, perception, and responsibility. What appears clear and actionable from one perspective may be incomplete or misleading from another, emphasizing the limits of knowledge and the inevitability of uncertainty. Each repetition enriches understanding, creating a narrative layering effect that mirrors the overlapping responsibilities of political, military, and personal domains. This structure also heightens suspense. Viewers know the event is unavoidable, yet the consequences remain uncertain until multiple perspectives converge, reinforcing the central tension between inevitability and choice. Thematically, the film interrogates deterrence theory and systemic fragility. By depicting a world where a single missile detection triggers cascading reactions across political, military, and personal levels, Bigelow highlights the delicate balance sustaining global security. The film raises profound questions. To what extent can human judgment be trusted under extreme pressure? How do emotions like grief, fear, and doubt intersect with rational decision-making? What moral frameworks guide leaders when technological systems amplify both power and vulnerability? These questions are never answered simplistically. The film embraces ambiguity, inviting audiences to contemplate the ethical, emotional, and procedural dimensions of existential risk. Music and sound design further amplify narrative tension. Bertelmann's score is deliberately minimalistic, employing rhythmic pulses, subtle electronic textures, and strategic silences that mirror the physiological experience of stress and anticipation. Diegetic sounds, keyboard taps, alarm sirens, communications chatter, anchor the audience in the operational reality of crisis management. Sound becomes a narrative instrument, shaping perception and heightening suspense without relying on conventional cinematic cues like explosive set pieces or overt melodrama. Character arcs develop in tandem with narrative escalation. President Elba's journey is one of ethical and emotional maturation. He evolves from a composed, authoritative figure into a leader confronted with the full weight of human responsibility, moral ambiguity, and systemic unpredictability. Walker's arc emphasizes the interplay between procedural fidelity and moral agency, while Baker embodies the human consequences of grief intersecting with professional duty. Secondary characters' arcs, though subtler, reinforce central themes. Each choice, hesitation, and action contributes to the collective outcome, highlighting the distributed responsibility inherent in complex systems. Scenes are meticulously constructed to balance realism with narrative intensity. For instance, a key sequence depicts Walker executing interceptor calculations while simultaneously relaying information to the president and advisors. The camera alternates between close-ups of her concentration, screens displaying missile trajectories, and the tense deliberations of political leadership. The sequence is extended in real time, emphasizing the procedural weight of action and the interdependence of technical accuracy and human decision-making. Similarly, Baker's deliberation scenes interweave private reflection, consultation with subordinates, and communication with the president, creating a multilayered portrayal of responsibility that resonates both emotionally and intellectually. The film's climax is both procedural and psychological. Decisions converge across the triptych perspectives, each revealing previously unseen facets of action and consequence. The President, Secretary Baker, and Captain Walker must reconcile incomplete data, conflicting intelligence, and personal emotion to arrive at decisions that could determine the fate of millions. The tension is drawn out with deliberate pacing, emphasizing that resolution is not achieved through spectacle but through the painstaking alignment of judgment, timing, and ethical consideration. The plot of A House of Dynamite is designed to maintain tension at a near-constant level, with the narrative clock ticking ever closer to an inevitable catastrophe. Within this framework, the film's layered perspectives offer insight into the psychological and emotional states of its characters. The repetition of the same critical timeframe from multiple viewpoints allows the audience to see how differing perceptions, biases, and priorities can shape decision-making. This narrative device reinforces the film's central theme, that the human element is both essential and fallible in crises of immense scale. Each perspective adds layers of complexity, revealing hidden motivations, doubts, and internal conflicts that inform the characters' choices. As the storyline loops through these perspectives, subtle details, expressions, gestures, and exchanges take on new meaning, demonstrating how understanding can shift with context and viewpoint. Captain Olivia Walker's perspective emphasizes analytical thinking and procedural adherence, yet it also exposes the emotional burden carried by those responsible for life-and-death decisions. Walker's interactions with colleagues and superiors illustrate the constant negotiation between duty, morality, and urgency. She is acutely aware that inaction is itself a choice with consequences, and the film captures the internal tension generated by this realization. The narrative shows her confronting the uncertainty inherent in intelligence interpretation, weighing incomplete or conflicting information against the imperative to act decisively. This tension between caution and action highlights the psychological complexity of leadership under duress and reinforces the film's focus on human fallibility and moral responsibility. General Anthony Brady's perspective introduces a counterpoint, emphasizing decisiveness, rapid response, and the imperative to assert control in the face of potential disaster. His approach is shaped by military training, personal conviction, and the perceived necessity of acting before external threats can materialize fully. The film explores the cognitive and emotional pressures inherent in such high-stakes leadership, depicting the ways in which stress, prior experience, and personal temperament influence judgment. Brady's perspective reveals the potential dangers of overconfidence and impulsivity, demonstrating how even well-intentioned decisions can carry unforeseen consequences. Through his lens, the audience experiences the tension between strategic rationality and human instinct, illustrating the moral and procedural dilemmas faced by leaders in moments of crisis. The President's perspective, portrayed by Idris Elba, serves as the narrative anchor and moral center of the film. It provides the broadest context for understanding the stakes, encompassing both the national implications of the crisis and the personal consequences of leadership decisions. The President is depicted weighing competing advice from military, intelligence, and emergency management officials, interpreting fragmented and sometimes contradictory information, and contemplating the ethical ramifications of potential actions. His perspective illuminates the psychological toll of ultimate responsibility, illustrating the burden of authority in a high-stakes environment. The narrative emphasizes the interplay between rational calculation, emotional intelligence, and moral judgment, portraying the President as a figure caught between procedural necessity and ethical obligation. Supporting characters further enrich the narrative tapestry, contributing to both plot development and thematic exploration. Jake Barrington, as Deputy National Security Advisor, provides critical analytical insight, bridging intelligence assessments with actionable policy recommendations. Secretary of Defense Reed Baker serves as a stabilizing influence, offering strategic perspective and historical context that informs decision-making. Major Daniel Gonzalez and Kathy Rogers illustrate operational execution and civil management, grounding the abstract threat of nuclear destruction in concrete human and logistical realities. Each supporting character highlights the interdependence of expertise, collaboration, and communication in managing crises, emphasizing that successful outcomes depend on the integration of diverse perspectives and competencies. Technical and production elements work synergistically to sustain narrative tension and realism. The cinematography by Barry Ackroyd employs a combination of handheld shots, tight framing, and deliberate pacing to immerse the audience in the immediacy of the crisis. Close-ups reveal the emotional weight borne by characters, while wider shots contextualize the operational scope and complexity of the decision-making process. Kirk Baxter's editing skillfully navigates the film's looping timeline, ensuring clarity while maintaining suspense. Volker Bertelmann's score underscores the narrative's psychological intensity, balancing atmospheric tension with dramatic urgency, while Paul N. J. Ottison's sound design enhances realism, from the mechanical hum of missile silos to the ambient noise of command centers. The interplay of these elements creates a cohesive audiovisual experience that amplifies both the emotional and procedural stakes of the story. The film's exploration of moral and ethical dilemmas is central to its thematic resonance. By placing characters in situations where every choice carries potentially catastrophic consequences, the narrative interrogates the nature of responsibility, human judgment, and ethical decision-making under extreme pressure. The ambiguity surrounding the missile's origin and ultimate impact reinforces the uncertainty inherent in such scenarios, compelling viewers to grapple with the limitations of foresight and the ethical complexity of decisions made in moments of crisis. Through this lens, the film becomes both a suspenseful thriller and a meditation on leadership, accountability, and the human condition in the face of existential threats. Production design and visual storytelling further enhance immersion. The White House Situation Room, military command centers, and operational sites are meticulously constructed, reflecting authentic procedural layouts and equipment. Attention to detail extends to lighting, color palette, and spatial arrangement, reinforcing narrative tension and emotional intensity. Costume design, subtle yet deliberate, distinguishes roles, communicates hierarchy, and underscores the interplay between personal and institutional identity. These visual elements support the narrative's thematic depth, emphasizing both the procedural rigor and psychological complexity of crisis management. Reception and audience engagement reflect the film's dual emphasis on suspense and thematic exploration. Critical acclaim highlighted its technical excellence, innovative narrative structure, and nuanced performances, particularly by Ferguson, Letts, and Elba. Some audiences expressed frustration with the ambiguous ending, yet this narrative choice was intentional, emphasizing uncertainty and moral complexity as central elements of the story. Discussions and analyses generated by the film extend beyond conventional entertainment, encouraging viewers to consider the psychological, ethical, and strategic dimensions of leadership in extreme circumstances. The film's success lies not only in its dramatic tension but also in its capacity to provoke thought and reflection regarding the human and institutional factors that shape decision-making under pressure. The film also situates itself within a broader cinematic tradition of political thrillers and disaster narratives, drawing comparisons to works that explore high-stakes decision-making, ethical ambiguity, and procedural tension. Bigelow's approach distinguishes itself through the combination of meticulous research, immersive visual storytelling, and layered narrative perspective, offering a distinctive contribution to the genre. The emphasis on realism, both technical and psychological, allows the film to resonate with contemporary audiences attuned to geopolitical uncertainty and the ethical dimensions of leadership. By merging suspense, character study, and thematic depth, A House of Dynamite positions itself as a thought-provoking and emotionally engaging work that transcends conventional thriller tropes. The narrative progression of A House of Dynamite meticulously alternates between operational urgency, political calculation, and personal reflection, allowing the audience to inhabit the full spectrum of human experience under existential threat. Following the initial detection of the missile, the camera follows Walker as she consults with analysts and communicates with field officers. Every motion, glance, and keystroke is imbued with tension, the editing rhythm mirrors the rising tempo of the threat. The sequence unfolds like a symphony of stress, where each instrument, the analyst's nervous exchanges, the beeping of consoles, the cold hum of servers, contributes to an overarching anxiety. These early scenes establish the meticulous procedural realism that pervades the film. Every decision, delay, or misinterpretation carries weight, and the viewer feels the cumulative pressure alongside the characters. The sequence at Fort Greely with Major Gonzalez escalates the stakes by situating the audience in a remote and extreme environment. Gonzalez walks along snow-packed observation decks, glances at radar screens, and monitors interceptor readiness with a tension that is both physical and psychological. Ramos's performance conveys the burden of isolation. His every breath is visible in the frigid air, every muscle subtly taut with anticipation. The film's cinematography accentuates this isolation, using wide shots of the snow-covered landscape to emphasize the vulnerability of human actors in the vast, indifferent environment. The juxtaposition of the precise actions required for missile interception against the boundless, inhospitable terrain highlights the enormity of responsibility borne by individuals in this high-stakes scenario. Meanwhile, the Situation Room sequences expand on the interplay of institutional hierarchy, expertise, and moral decision-making. General Brady, with his insistence on immediate counteraction, embodies the classical military ethos of decisiveness, while Anna Park's advocacy for caution represents the nuanced intelligence perspective. These conflicting worldviews are amplified through dialogue and spatial staging. Brady dominates the center of the room, emphasizing authority and decisiveness, whereas Park is often positioned slightly off-center, signaling a moral and intellectual counterweight. The National Security Advisor, portrayed by Gabriel Basso, serves as both mediator and audience surrogate, translating technical debates into human terms and exposing the ethical complexity inherent in strategic decision-making. The scene meticulously demonstrates that even within a single chain of command, divergence of interpretation and judgment can drastically influence outcomes. The narrative further interweaves the president's perspective, reinforcing the human and moral dimensions of decision-making. Idris Elba's performance conveys the paradoxical burden of ultimate authority. Decisiveness must coexist with empathy, strategic calculation with moral reflection. In one carefully staged sequence, the president receives notification of the missile while engaging with children at a basketball clinic. The director deliberately contrasts the innocence and playfulness of the scene with the immediacy of existential threat, emphasizing the intrusion of global crises into ordinary life. Subsequent sequences depict the president in secure command locations, navigating technical briefings, consultations with advisors, and rapid decision-making scenarios. Here, the tension is both procedural and emotional. Every step, every input, every second of delay can produce consequences of unimaginable magnitude. Secretary of Defense Reed Baker's arc intensifies the narrative's emotional depth. The grief he carries from personal loss intersects with his professional responsibilities, creating a duality that resonates with broader themes of human vulnerability under extreme pressure. Baker's hesitation, reflection, and eventual act of stepping into potential mortality are framed with deliberate cinematographic choices. Lingering close-ups capture subtle expressions of fear and resolve, while the rooftop sequence's wide shots situate Baker against the expansive, impersonal cityscape, reinforcing the enormity of his moral and psychological burden. Harris's performance transforms Baker into both a symbolic and emotionally grounded figure, illustrating the personal cost of leadership in crises where every decision carries existential stakes. Interspersed throughout the three perspectives are sequences that highlight the technical challenges and limitations of missile defense systems. Interceptor launches are depicted with a combination of detailed procedural accuracy and dramatic tension. The film does not shy away from the possibility of technological failure. One interceptor misses, another deviates from trajectory, and the radar tracking system reveals imperfections in real-time calculations. By portraying these failures in a realistic manner, the narrative reinforces a central theme: technology can assist, but cannot substitute for human judgment, moral discernment, or the psychological capacity to act under uncertainty. The film's consultation with military experts ensures that even dramatic sequences maintain plausibility, lending credibility and authenticity to the suspense. Character development extends beyond the central figures, incorporating nuanced subplots that underscore both procedural complexity and personal stakes. For example, minor officers and analysts in the Situation Room are shown interacting with families through brief messages, phone calls, and whispered exchanges, providing a window into the emotional lives behind institutional roles. These vignettes humanize the broader machinery of governance, reminding viewers that each high-level policy decision reverberates through countless personal lives. Similarly, Gonzalez's interactions with fellow officers highlight collaboration, trust, and shared responsibility, illustrating how human relationships serve as critical stabilizing factors in scenarios of extreme stress. The film's treatment of time is central to its narrative tension. The overlapping three-part perspective, combined with deliberate editing choices, constructs a polyphonic temporal framework in which the audience experiences simultaneity, uncertainty, and partial knowledge. Moments are repeated from different vantage points, revealing previously hidden information and reframing audience understanding. This technique mirrors real-world crisis management, where information flows asynchronously, interpretations differ, and leaders often act without full knowledge. By structuring the narrative in this manner, the filmmakers immerse the viewer in the cognitive and moral complexity of high-stakes decision-making. Symbolism permeates the film, reinforcing its thematic preoccupations. The missile functions not only as a literal threat but also as a metaphor for systemic fragility, unpredictability, and latent global vulnerability. Environmental imagery, the stark Alaskan terrain, the cold, sterile interiors of command centers, the sprawling cityscapes under threat, serves to situate human action within a broader, indifferent universe. The repeated visual motif of communication devices, phones, consoles, secure links, underscores the dual nature of technology, as both lifeline and instrument of potential miscalculation. The interplay of human actors with these technological and environmental elements reflects a key message: modern civilization operates under constant, fragile tension, dependent upon both human judgment and technological systems. The film's exploration of ethical complexity is particularly striking. Characters are repeatedly confronted with choices in which no option is free from moral compromise. Brady's insistence on decisive military action, Park's caution and advocacy for diplomacy, the president's deliberations over authorization, and Baker's personal reflections each illustrate facets of the ethical burden faced by decision-makers. These portrayals resist simplistic moral binaries. Instead, they present a landscape in which right and wrong are contingent, context-dependent, and morally fraught. The ambiguity of the film's ending, leaving the missile's impact and the president's decision unresolved, extends this thematic exploration to the audience, forcing reflection on the challenges inherent in moral judgment under uncertainty. From a geopolitical standpoint, the narrative resonates with contemporary anxieties surrounding nuclear deterrence, escalation, and global interdependence. By leaving the missile's origin unidentified, the film underscores the dangers of misattribution and the potential for catastrophic misunderstanding. Characters' debates over possible perpetrators, interpretations of intelligence, and potential responses illustrate the complex interplay of perception, uncertainty, and strategic calculation in international relations. The film also highlights the limitations of existing defense and diplomatic mechanisms, suggesting that in a world of high-stakes nuclear tension, human judgment, ethics, and resilience remain crucial determinants of survival. Cinematically, the film employs visual and auditory techniques to reinforce thematic and emotional impact. Ackroyd cinematography alternates between handheld immediacy in confined spaces and wide, static shots situating human action within broader, impersonal environments. Lighting choices, cold fluorescence, harsh winter natural light, warm interior tones, serve to differentiate narrative perspectives while reinforcing psychological states. Bertelmann's score functions as both emotional guide and psychological texture, integrating low-frequency drones, subtle electronic motifs, and moments of near silence to heighten tension and underscore vulnerability. Sound design, particularly in sequences of interceptor launches and radar tracking, conveys technological complexity and human stakes simultaneously. The film's reception reflects its intellectual and emotional resonance. Critics have praised its plausibility, tension, and refusal of conventional resolution, noting that it stimulates reflection on both procedural and moral dimensions of crisis management. Audiences have debated the ambiguous ending, discussing potential scenarios, ethical considerations, and real-world parallels. Social media discourse, think tank analyses, and journalistic commentary have treated the film as more than entertainment. It has become a catalyst for public engagement with questions of leadership, deterrence, and the ethical dimensions of existential risk. This engagement illustrates the film's cultural significance, positioning it as a work that merges cinematic craft with philosophical, ethical, and geopolitical inquiry. The minor characters further enrich the narrative tapestry. Analysts, communication officers, and technical specialists are depicted not as background props but as active participants whose observations, interpretations, and judgments influence outcomes. The film's attention to these roles emphasizes that the functioning of complex systems depends on distributed responsibility, collaboration, and human judgment at multiple levels. These portrayals reinforce the central thesis, that even in technologically advanced societies, human cognition, communication, and moral discernment are indispensable. Throughout the narrative, interpersonal relationships provide an emotional anchor. Walker's mentoring interactions, Gonzalez's concern for colleagues and family, the president's reliance on aides, and Baker's reflections on estranged family members humanize the procedural complexity of crisis response. These personal dimensions emphasize that existential threats are experienced not only institutionally but intimately, affecting human relationships, ethical decision-making, and emotional resilience. The film's sustained focus on these interactions differentiates it from conventional thrillers, which often prioritize spectacle over character depth. The film's structural and thematic choices collectively underscore a central argument: modern civilization, while technologically sophisticated, remains fundamentally fragile, reliant upon human judgment, ethical reasoning, and resilience in the face of uncertainty. By interweaving procedural realism, emotional depth, technical plausibility, and geopolitical sophistication, the film presents a multidimensional exploration of existential risk. Its refusal to provide tidy resolution or definitive attribution reinforces this message, confronting the audience with the uncomfortable reality that some crises do not allow for closure or certainty. In sum, A House of Dynamite represents a synthesis of cinematic craft, ethical inquiry, and geopolitical reflection. Its meticulous attention to psychological realism, technological plausibility, narrative structure, and symbolic resonance creates an experience that is both intellectually rigorous and emotionally compelling. The overlapping perspectives, polyphonic narrative, and sustained tension immerse the audience in a world in which moral and procedural complexity are inseparable from personal vulnerability. The ambiguous ending challenges conventional narrative expectations, transforming the film into a meditation on uncertainty, responsibility, and the precariousness of human civilization. By merging entertainment with philosophical and strategic inquiry, the film situates itself as a cultural touchstone, stimulating reflection on the ethical, psychological, and strategic dimensions of life in a high-stakes, technologically interconnected world. The morning sky above the Pacific was deceivingly calm, a wide expanse of pale blue brushed with soft clouds, yet for Captain Olivia Walker, stationed in the White House Situation Room, calm was merely a veneer masking an invisible storm. The room hummed quietly with the life of intelligence operations. Banks of monitors scrolled lines of code, maps flickered with the positions of satellites and naval vessels, and low-frequency alarms occasionally beeped to signal anomalies. Olivia's eyes darted from screen to screen, absorbing fragments of information that, individually, seemed innocuous, but collectively hinted at something unusual. Her fingers moved with surgical precision over the keyboard, toggling between feeds, cross-referencing communications, and analyzing real-time telemetry. Every decision she made in these moments would ripple far beyond the Situation Room walls. She paused, studying a radar anomaly near the Pacific, its movement unclassified, unclaimed, yet unmistakable in its potential danger. "This doesn't make sense," she murmured, a quiet acknowledgement of the unknown. The phrase was almost lost among the hum of machines, but it encapsulated the tension in the room. Her mind raced, simulating trajectories, assessing probabilities, mentally running through every protocol she had been trained to execute. Her breathing was measured, controlled, though the underlying intensity threatened to make her hands tremble slightly. The hum of the room became almost rhythmic, a heartbeat synchronizing with the faint blips of radar signals that could determine life or death for millions. Thousands of miles away, in the frozen expanse of Fort Greely, Alaska, Major Daniel Gonzalez strode among the missile defense consoles with the composure of someone who had rehearsed disaster for years yet was acutely aware of its unpredictability. The ground-based mid-course defense system was ready to respond, yet imperfect, technology capable of intercepting incoming warheads, but not infallible. Every console flicker, every signal anomaly, every cross-check of telemetry data carried consequences too vast to fully comprehend. Gonzalez's thoughts briefly drifted to his daughter, sleeping safely thousands of miles away, her innocence untouched by the stakes he now faced. The photograph on his console, a simple drawing of a rocket he had taken her to see, was both a talisman and a reminder of what was at risk. His hands hovered over the control panel, steady yet tense. "Lock targeting vector," he commanded, his voice measured. The crew responded, precise, trained, aware of the gravity they shared but constrained by procedure and protocol. Back in Washington, D.C., the Situation Room began to fill with activity. The president, portrayed with quiet gravitas by Idris Elba, entered, absorbing the intelligence reports streaming across the room. He listened as Secretary of Defense Reed Baker, still mourning his spouse, spoke with a controlled but emotionally resonant authority. "We do not have confirmation of the missile's origin," Reed said, pausing briefly, "and our intercept systems cannot guarantee success. Any action we take carries profound risk." His voice betrayed the tension of someone carrying not just professional responsibility but personal grief. The president nodded, aware that every word spoken, every decision made here, could ripple across the globe. Olivia's phone vibrated with a message from her sibling, a mundane check-in entirely oblivious to the unfolding crisis. She glanced at it, a fleeting warmth in her eyes, then returned her attention to the screens, her personal world suspended while the international stage demanded total focus. It was this intersection of personal vulnerability and professional duty that formed the film's core emotional tension, human beings operating within systems of extraordinary power, systems that magnify every hesitation, every judgment, every emotional impulse. As radar arrays locked onto the anomaly, the missile's velocity, trajectory, and potential payload flashed across multiple screens. Analysts debated its origin: North Korea, a rogue state, a malfunctioning early warning satellite. Each new data point added complexity, uncertainty, and ethical stakes. Olivia synthesized this information, preparing to brief the president and relay recommendations to military commanders. Her voice, calm yet firm, cut through the room's low hum. "Trajectory indicates mid-course approach within the next 10 minutes, she reported. "Interceptors can be deployed, but success probability is variable. Attribution is uncertain." The room fell silent. Each person processed the implications in their own way, some scanned their screens, others rubbed tense foreheads, a few whispered under their breath. At Fort Greely, Gonzalez and his crew initiated the intercept sequence. Calculations had to be precise: timing, velocity, alignment. Any misstep could render the system ineffective. "Ready for launch," one officer said, eyes locked on monitors. Gonzalez checked once more. "Trajectory locked. Engage when ready." Fingers flew over controls, the quiet clatter of keyboards amplifying the room's tension. The missiles were launched, cutting across the frozen Alaskan sky, invisible to the naked eye but meticulously tracked through telemetry. The room seemed suspended in time, every pulse of data a reminder of the stakes. Gonzalez whispered a silent prayer, not religious but human: "Come on. Just work." In the Situation Room, the president absorbed each incoming update, weighing it against the advice of his team. Advisors argued, sometimes heatedly, over whether to authorize a preemptive response. Ethical dilemmas layered over technical calculations: strike first and risk misattribution, or wait and risk a successful attack. The debate was intense, deeply human, exposing personal biases and emotional burdens. The president remained composed, listening, calculating, his internal struggle mirrored in micro-expressions, a tightened jaw, a flicker of doubt in his eyes, a breath held and released. Olivia's mind raced, analyzing data streams, double-checking probabilities, predicting trajectories. Each update was a thread in a web of immense consequence. Her heartbeat synchronized with the hum of machines and the beeps of telemetry, creating a rhythm that was both hypnotic and suffocating. She occasionally glanced at the small message on her phone again, a reminder of human normalcy beyond the storm, and drew a quiet breath, steeling herself. The interceptors approached the missile's mid-course trajectory. Gonzalez's voice was steady but tinged with tension, adjust vector by 0.2 degrees. Confirm alignment. Prepare for terminal guidance. The team followed, movements precise, rehearsed, almost ritualistic. Each action was a dance with fate. The audience experiences every flicker of the monitors, every adjustment, every calculation, as though their own judgment might tip the balance between survival and catastrophe. Simultaneously, in Washington, the ethical calculus reached its apex. Advisors presented conflicting options. A retaliatory strike could signal resolve but might ignite global conflict, restraint could prevent escalation but risked emboldening aggressors. The president absorbed arguments, posed counter-questions, weighed probabilities, and felt the emotional weight of leadership pressing against his chest. In his private mind, he envisioned the human cost, lives lost, families torn apart, entire communities extinguished. The film immerses the audience in this psychological tension, the human struggle behind national decisions, the intersection of morality, fear, and responsibility. As the interceptors engaged, data streamed back, partial success, uncertainty in targeting, environmental variables beyond control. Gonzalez leaned closer, eyes darting across screens. Impact confirmation pending, he whispered. Olivia relayed updates in real time, velocity deviation within expected parameters, but intercept outcome is unverified. Decision required. The president's hand hovered above the map table, trembling subtly as the enormity of choice pressed on him. Every second stretched into minutes, every decision carried historical weight. Meanwhile, civilians, unknowingly connected to the unfolding drama, received fragments of information, news alerts, unusual military activity, rumors on social media. The film intercuts briefly to show the broader human impact, families checking phones, children playing unaware, workers pausing mid-task. The juxtaposition underscores the contrast between the invisible intensity of crisis management and the mundane continuity of ordinary life, reinforcing the human scale beneath global stakes. Gonzalez's fingers tightened around the console as telemetry confirmed partial success. Relief mixed with tension, the missile's full impact remained unknown. He whispered his daughter's name silently, grounding himself in personal stakes while maintaining operational discipline. Olivia exhaled, allowing a fraction of tension to dissipate but remaining vigilant. The president considered his next move: retaliation, restraint, diplomatic communication. His team's voices overlapped, each perspective colored by personal judgment, professional expertise, and emotional undercurrents. Ethical dilemmas persisted. Could an unknown origin justify a retaliatory strike? Would inaction signal weakness? The president weighed each option in silence, then spoke with measured authority. "We act with information, not fear," he said, a statement both operational and moral. Advisors nodded, some reluctantly, others with visible relief. The decision was made not with certainty but with ethical conviction, a testament to human judgment under extreme conditions. The missile's aftermath remained partially unresolved, emphasizing the ongoing uncertainty inherent in nuclear defense. The film deliberately avoids tidy resolutions, leaving geopolitical consequences ambiguous, reinforcing the theme that even meticulously planned interventions exist in a realm of uncontrollable variables. Emotional arcs, however, reach closure. Gonzalez reconnects with his family, Olivia processes her fears, the president reflects on the moral weight of leadership. The film's cinematic craft enhances every narrative beat. The hum of machines, the flicker of displays, the tension in dialogue, and the subtle gestures of characters create an immersive, continuous flow of intensity. Sound, light, and camera angles work in tandem to convey both operational precision and human vulnerability. Bigelow's direction ensures that the audience experiences the psychological and ethical tension of each decision, the technical rigor of crisis management, and the intimate human stakes intertwined with national security. Throughout, A House of Dynamite interrogates assumptions about technology, leadership, and morality. Systems designed for defense are portrayed as fallible, decision-making as complex, and human judgment as central to survival. Leadership is shown not as a series of strategic maneuvers but as the navigation of moral, ethical, and emotional terrain under conditions of extreme uncertainty. The film resonates as a meditation on resilience, responsibility, and the fragile architecture of global security. Even as the immediate crisis concludes, ambiguity lingers. The missile's origin remains uncertain, the political consequences continue to unfold, and the audience is left reflecting on the precarious balance maintained by human decisions, technological systems, and ethical judgment. Characters are irrevocably changed, the president carries the moral weight of action and restraint, Olivia reconciles professional composure with personal vulnerability, Gonzalez reconnects with the human stakes of his duty. The film emphasizes that global security is sustained not by certainty but by human courage, judgment, and ethical awareness. As the narrative approaches its climax, the film heightens both procedural tension and emotional intensity. Bigelow deliberately interlaces multiple storylines, forcing viewers to simultaneously track military operations, political deliberations, and individual emotional struggles. In one extended sequence, Captain Olivia Walker is shown in the Missile Defense Command Center, coordinating communications with satellite operators, radar analysts, and high-ranking officers. The camera captures minute details, the flicker of her eyes scanning incoming data, the slight tremor of her hand as she inputs trajectory corrections, the audible intake of breath as alarms signal critical thresholds. Each action is precise, but fraught with uncertainty. The film underscores that even expertise cannot remove the fundamental unpredictability inherent in nuclear defense systems. Parallel to Walker's tense operational work, the president is shown navigating a series of interdepartmental briefings. Each briefing offers conflicting assessments, intelligence analysts emphasize probabilities rather than certainties, foreign liaisons provide partial context, and political advisors caution against rash decisions that could escalate the crisis. Idris Elba's portrayal of the president emphasizes restraint, intellectual rigor, and moral reflection. He is forced to negotiate between competing imperatives, the imperative to act decisively to protect the nation, the ethical responsibility to avoid unnecessary escalation, and the personal weight of potential loss. Subtle facial expressions, brief pauses, and controlled gestures convey a leader grappling with both the enormity of his responsibilities and the human consequences of error. Secretary of Defense Reed Baker's arc converges with these operational and political threads in moments that are simultaneously intimate and epical. His grief for his deceased spouse is juxtaposed against the cold logic of military strategy, highlighting a key thematic tension. Personal vulnerability exists even within systems designed for rational calculation. Baker's moments of reflection, pausing to glance at a photograph, adjusting a personal memento, or quietly muttering a private recollection, underscore that every technical decision occurs within a human context. Bigelow's framing of these moments within expansive war rooms or small private offices emphasizes the contrast between personal and systemic scale, reminding viewers that global stakes are inseparable from individual experiences. Dialogue throughout these climactic sequences is taut, purposeful, and often laden with moral ambiguity. Conversations oscillate between technical precision and philosophical reflection. For instance, exchanges between Walker and her superiors involve complex calculations expressed in shorthand acronyms and velocity vectors, yet these technical discussions are interwoven with ethical considerations, the potential consequences of interception, collateral risks, and the psychological burden of acting as a conduit for potentially catastrophic decisions. Similar dynamics are evident in political deliberations. The President and Secretary Baker must evaluate imperfect intelligence, anticipate adversary responses, and weigh the human cost of preemptive or retaliatory action. Each line of dialogue is infused with tension, contributing to an overarching sense of immediacy and high stakes. Visual symbolism reaches its apex in these sequences. The missile, as a recurring motif, is portrayed through both direct technical visualization and metaphorical imagery. Screens displaying trajectories, countdown timers, and radar pings repeatedly appear, reinforcing the relentless pressure of time. Physical spaces, the confined command centers, the narrow hallways of governmental buildings, and the restricted visibility of private offices, function as visual metaphors for constrained choice, emphasizing that the operational and ethical options available to characters are deliberately limited. Lighting, framing, and color palette remain central to Bigelow's strategy. Stark, high-contrast lighting in operational centers conveys clinical urgency, while softer, warmer tones in private spaces convey reflection, vulnerability, and moral complexity. The narrative's triptych structure ensures that climactic events are experienced from multiple vantage points, each enriching audience understanding. An action that appears decisive from Walker's perspective is reframed when viewed through the president's political lens, revealing nuances of authority, accountability, and interdependence. Baker's perspective adds further depth, emphasizing the human and emotional consequences of each decision. By revisiting critical events from multiple angles, the film reinforces central themes: that perception is partial, decision-making is fraught with uncertainty, and responsibility is shared across intersecting domains of authority. Emotionally, the climax emphasizes the interconnection between personal vulnerability and professional obligation. The president, Baker, and Walker each confront moments of moral and ethical reckoning. Elba's president must decide how to act without complete certainty, balancing protective imperatives with ethical caution. Baker's grief informs his strategic judgment, while Walker embodies the tension between technical responsibility and moral agency. These intersecting arcs culminate in decisions that are high stakes both procedurally and emotionally, illustrating the film's insistence on human agency as the ultimate arbiter of outcomes. Bigelow extends this emotional realism to minor characters as well. Radar operators, junior analysts, and military aides are not mere background; their anxiety, decision-making, and micro-errors ripple through the larger narrative. These characters demonstrate the distributed nature of responsibility. While ultimate decisions rest with political and military leadership, the contributions, hesitations, and reactions of many individuals collectively shape outcomes. The result is a densely woven tapestry of human experience, technical precision, and ethical consideration, in which every actor, large or small, is integral to the narrative fabric. Cinematography during these climactic moments is dynamic yet grounded. Aykroyd's camera alternates between wide shots conveying scale and intimacy, emphasizing both systemic magnitude and personal stakes. Quick cuts convey operational urgency, while lingering close-ups highlight individual emotional responses. Motion within frames, characters pacing, gestures toward screens, shifting postures, reinforces the sense of urgency, tension, and interconnection. The juxtaposition of kinetic camera movement in operational sequences with static or gently tracking shots in private, reflective spaces underscores the film's thematic tension between system-driven activity and personal introspection. Musical and auditory elements similarly reinforce suspense and emotional resonance. Bertelmann's score escalates subtly, employing rhythmic pulses, low-frequency oscillations, and intermittent electronic flourishes that mimic the physiological experience of stress. The score never overwhelms the narrative; instead, it complements the diegetic sounds of monitors, key presses, and radio communications, heightening the immersive effect. Silence is equally significant. Pauses in sound, particularly during critical decision points, emphasize weight, anticipation, and moral tension. As the climactic events unfold, the triptych perspectives converge, revealing new dimensions of prior actions. An intercept attempt executed by Walker, initially portrayed as technically routine, is reframed through political deliberation as ethically complex. A strategic hesitation by the president, initially perceived as caution, gains significance when juxtaposed with Baker's internal reflection on moral and personal consequences. This narrative layering heightens both suspense and thematic resonance, illustrating that outcomes are rarely singular or simple. Each decision carries a multiplicity of consequences, and understanding emerges only through the synthesis of perspective, information, and ethical judgment. Symbolism continues to deepen throughout these sequences. The missile embodies uncertainty, destructive potential, and the ethical dilemmas inherent in human technological interaction. Control centers, corridors, and constrained office spaces function as metaphors for the limits of agency, the narrow margins of operational and moral choice, and the pressures that shape human decision-making. Even mundane objects, a flickering screen, a hand hovering over a console, or a photograph on a desk, gain layered meaning, symbolizing the intersection of individual experience, systemic function, and existential consequence. The morning sky over the Pacific was calm, almost deceptively serene, the kind of calm that masked the latent power of oceans and atmospheres alike. For Captain Olivia Walker, stationed in the White House Situation Room, calm was a veneer, a temporary illusion before the chaos of real-time crisis management took hold. Rows of monitors flickered with data streams, satellite feeds, and radar sweeps, each line of information representing the lives of millions. Olivia's eyes moved swiftly across the screens, scanning for anomalies, inconsistencies, or patterns that might indicate a threat. Her fingers tapped rapidly on the keyboard, executing commands with precision, though beneath her professional composure, a quiet tension simmered. "This doesn't make sense," she whispered to herself, eyes narrowing on an anomaly hovering over the Pacific. The missile detected had no confirmed origin, no declared ownership, yet its trajectory suggested calculated intent. Her mind raced through simulations, probability matrices, historical precedents, all while ensuring she maintained the outward calm expected of her role. The Situation Room hummed around her, analysts murmuring updates, screens flickering, alarms quietly signaling minor system alerts. Each small beep, each data line, was a thread in a vast web of human decisions that could cascade into global catastrophe. Thousands of miles north, Major Daniel Gonzalez monitored the ground-based mid-course defense system at Fort Greely, Alaska. The frigid air, the hum of electronics, the blinking consoles, all created a tense symphony of readiness. He moved among the screens with practiced precision, issuing commands and corrections, ensuring that the interceptors were prepared to engage. His team operated like a well-rehearsed machine, every officer aware of their role, every movement precise yet charged with human anxiety. Gonzalez's thoughts flickered briefly to his daughter, sleeping far away, innocent and unaware of the world-altering stakes her father was navigating. He paused, fingers hovering over the controls, whispering, "Come on. Just work." Back in Washington, the president entered the Situation Room, his presence both commanding and human. Idris Elba portrayed him with a nuanced blend of gravitas and vulnerability, the weight of responsibility evident in his measured steps and tight jaw. He absorbed the briefings from Secretary of Defense Reed Baker, who, despite personal grief, delivered his analysis with controlled authority. "We have an unidentified missile on a potential trajectory," Reed explained, voice tight but steady. "Interceptors may not guarantee success. Any action we take carries profound risk." The president exhaled slowly, his eyes scanning the displays. "Uncertainty is our constant companion," he said quietly, almost philosophically. "But indecision may be worse." Olivia's phone vibrated with a message from her sibling, a mundane check-in. She glanced at it, a fleeting warmth passing through her eyes, then returned her attention to the monitors. The juxtaposition of personal normalcy and global crisis underscored the human dimension at the heart of the narrative, people, with their vulnerabilities and emotions, navigating systems of extraordinary power. The radar anomaly confirmed itself, a missile, moving at high velocity, unclaimed, and undetected by conventional alerts. Olivia relayed updates to the president and military commanders, her voice calm, measured, precise. "Trajectory indicates mid-course approach within 10 minutes. Interceptors can be deployed, but success probability is variable. Attribution is uncertain." The room fell silent. Every individual absorbed the implication of those words, knowing that each subsequent decision could alter the course of history. At Fort Greely, Gonzalez initiated the intercept sequence. Calculations had to be precise: timing, velocity, alignment. Each adjustment carried enormous consequences. "Lock targeting vector," he commanded. The team executed flawlessly, their movements synchronized yet charged with quiet tension. The missiles launched, invisible arcs cutting through the frozen Alaskan sky, their paths meticulously tracked by telemetry. Gonzalez whispered a silent prayer, drawing strength from his duty and his love for those he protected. In Washington, the president absorbed each update in real time, weighing them against advice and moral consequence. Advisors argued fiercely: a preemptive strike might demonstrate resolve but risk escalation, restraint could prevent immediate conflict but signal weakness. The debate was tense, ethical, and deeply human, revealing the biases, fears, and hopes of those whose judgments shaped the world. The president listened, calculating probabilities, considering moral implications, envisioning the human toll. Micro-expressions, a tightened jaw, a held breath, a fleeting glance, betrayed the silent weight of leadership. Olivia monitored the streams of telemetry, cross-referencing every variable. Her heartbeat synchronized with the hum of machinery, the rhythmic beeping of radar, the pulse of uncertainty. She glanced at her phone again, a reminder of life beyond the crisis, before returning her focus to the screens. Every second mattered, every calculation could tip the balance between survival and annihilation. The interceptors engaged the missile midcourse. Gonzalez's voice remained steady yet tight: "Adjust vector by 0.2 degrees. Confirm alignment. Terminal guidance ready." The team followed, movements rehearsed yet emotionally charged. Each adjustment felt like a dance with fate, every keystroke a prayer for success. Meanwhile, the president weighed options, hearing conflicting advice from analysts and military officers. Ethical dilemmas dominated: retaliate without confirmed attribution and risk igniting war, or wait and risk the missile reaching its target. The room was tense, voices overlapping, each argument laced with human emotion: fear, grief, responsibility, doubt. The president absorbed it all, weighing probabilities against moral imperatives. He spoke finally: "We act with information, not fear." His tone carried authority and empathy, signaling both strategic decision-making and ethical responsibility. The missile's impact was partially mitigated. Data streamed in confirming success in part, but the full consequences remained uncertain. Gonzalez exhaled, relief mingling with residual tension, whispering his daughter's name again as a grounding force. Olivia allowed herself a small exhale of relief, her body still tensed, her mind already scanning for the next anomaly. The president reflected, contemplating the moral and political weight of action taken without full certainty. The ripple effects extended far beyond command centers. Civilians, unaware of the crisis, received fragmented information through news alerts and social media. Families checked phones, paused conversations, glanced skyward at flights overhead. Children played unaware, their laughter a stark contrast to the invisible tension managed by professionals. The film intercut these moments to emphasize the human scale beneath global stakes, reminding the audience of the fragility of everyday life against the backdrop of monumental decisions. Internal monologues deepened character perspectives. Olivia's mind raced: probability matrices, contingency plans, ethical calculations, personal fears, and fleeting thoughts of family. Gonzalez's focus wavered briefly, imagining his daughter's birthday, yet returned with renewed determination. The president navigated a labyrinth of professional responsibility and moral obligation, questioning each potential decision, imagining the human consequences in graphic detail. Every character was acutely human, simultaneously competent, fallible, courageous, and vulnerable. The interceptor sequence unfolded with tension so intense it became almost physical. Telemetry data shifted unpredictably, environmental factors altered expected outcomes, and split-second decisions dictated success or failure. Gonzalez issued rapid commands: adjust altitude. Correct for drift. Confirm guidance lock. Olivia relayed these updates to the president, who processed them while simultaneously weighing options for diplomatic communication and public statements. Each microsecond carried weight. Each decision bore human and geopolitical consequence. Ethical considerations remained paramount. Should a retaliatory strike be ordered? Could the unknown origin justify escalation? Advisors presented conflicting models and scenarios, interweaving statistics with moral judgment. The president deliberated in silence, internalizing each perspective, considering both the global and personal implications. His reflection was intimate, invisible to those around him but deeply felt: the enormity of responsibility, the weight of potential destruction, the imperative to act ethically under conditions of uncertainty. The aftermath was ambiguous yet emotionally resonant. Gonzalez debriefed with his team, acknowledging partial success and residual uncertainty. Olivia reflected privately on the emotional toll, processing fear, relief, and moral responsibility. The president reviewed the decision-making process, pondering the balance of ethical principle, strategic necessity, and human consequence. Civilians returned to daily life, unaware of the crisis they had skirted, yet the narrative reminded viewers of the constant, invisible vigilance required to maintain global stability. The film's cinematic techniques amplified every layer of tension. Sound design, hum of servers, beeping telemetry, whispered commands, created a rhythm of anxiety and anticipation. Lighting highlighted sterile command centers against warm human faces, emphasizing emotional vulnerability amid technological precision. Camera angles captured minute expressions, subtle gestures, and fleeting reactions that communicated as much as dialogue. Bigelow's direction immersed the audience in the psychological, moral, and technical dimensions of crisis management. Throughout, the narrative interrogates assumptions about technology, authority, and human judgment. Even the most advanced defense systems are fallible, even the most competent leaders are constrained by incomplete information and emotional vulnerability. The story emphasized that heroism is quiet and ethical, dependent on judgment, courage, and resilience, rather than spectacle or aggression. By the film's conclusion, ambiguity remained. The missile's origin and geopolitical consequences were unresolved, yet the emotional truth was clear. Characters were irrevocably changed, having confronted fear, responsibility, and the fragility of human systems. The president carried the moral weight of decisions made under uncertainty. Olivia reconciled professional poise with private vulnerability. Gonzalez reconnected with the personal stakes of duty and family. The audience was left to reflect on the intricate balance of power, the human cost of global security, and the ethical imperatives guiding decisions that remain largely unseen. The narrative culminated as a meditation on morality, human resilience, and technological fragility. Leadership was portrayed as an intricate dance of knowledge, judgment, and emotion, highlighting that survival, both personal and global, rests on human conscience as much as mechanical precision. Ethical courage, measured judgment, and moral reflection were positioned as the true shields protecting civilization. Even as the credits rolled, tension lingered. The missile's origin, the geopolitical fallout, and the unresolved consequences remained a haunting echo of uncertainty, reflecting reality's complex unpredictability. Characters stood irrevocably transformed, embodying the film's ultimate message: global security is fragile, morality is paramount, and human courage, quiet, ethical, and steadfast, is the only true safeguard against catastrophe. A House of Dynamite transcends conventional thriller narratives, blending operational realism with ethical complexity, psychological depth, and emotional resonance. It is simultaneously a procedural drama, a meditation on human responsibility, and a cinematic exploration of morality under extreme pressure. The audience emerges not with closure, but with reflection, awareness, and a profound appreciation for the invisible human courage sustaining a precariously balanced world. As the climax resolves, the film transitions into sequences that explore consequences, reflection, and the interplay between action and human interpretation. The missile threat, once immediate and visceral, recedes into resolution, yet the tension persists, not as spectacle, but as emotional and ethical reverberation. The President, Captain Walker, and Secretary Baker confront the aftermath of decisions whose stakes were existential. These sequences emphasize the lingering weight of responsibility, although catastrophe has been averted, the psychological and moral consequences remain. President Elba's character arc reaches a nuanced apex. He is portrayed not as a triumphant figure, but as one who has navigated the tension between duty, morality, and uncertainty. In quiet, private moments, he reflects on the limits of power. Decisions taken in confidence and under extreme pressure are shaped as much by incomplete knowledge and instinct as by formal authority. His reflection is complemented by subtle visual cues, a lingering gaze out the window of the Oval Office, the soft illumination of his face under lamplight, and the physical stillness after intense motion. These images convey the psychological residue of leadership, the realization that authority carries both protection and profound burden. Captain Olivia Walker's arc similarly reaches emotional closure. Her operational precision throughout the crisis is coupled with moments of human reflection, illustrating the complex balance between procedural fidelity and moral agency. Ferguson's performance emphasizes quiet relief, subtle introspection, and the enduring awareness of human vulnerability even amid technical mastery. In one extended shot, she reviews logs of her decisions, tracing the sequence of events with a mixture of relief and residual tension. Bigelow frames this as a meditation on professional integrity. The act of executing duty correctly is itself a moral statement, even when outcomes are mediated by chance, system imperfections, or others' choices. Secretary Baker's journey is particularly poignant in these resolution sequences. Harris portrays a man reconciling personal grief with professional responsibility, illustrating how emotional vulnerability and ethical reflection intersect with systemic decision-making. Scenes depict Baker quietly interacting with personal mementos, reflecting upon the consequences of his choices, and contemplating the moral weight carried by those in positions of authority. Bigelow's framing emphasizes the private nature of this reflection, often juxtaposing Baker's introspective moments against the expansive operational environments he inhabits, visually reinforcing the contrast between systemic magnitude and personal agency. The convergence of the three perspectives, the President, Walker, and Baker, underscores one of the film's central thematic conclusions: global-scale events are ultimately mediated through human perception, judgment, and ethical deliberation. By maintaining the triptych narrative through to resolution, Bigelow reinforces that outcomes are not solely the product of technological precision or institutional authority, but of the complex interplay between human insight, moral awareness, and procedural action. Even as the immediate threat dissipates, the narrative insists that vigilance, reflection, and ethical responsibility remain indispensable. Visual symbolism remains prominent in these sequences. Monitors once aglow with urgency are now darkened, signaling the end of immediate threat. Physical spaces, the command centers, corridors, and offices, retain residual signs of activity. Displaced documents, lingering shadows, and muted ambient lighting convey both continuity and transition. Objects previously charged with operational significance, keyboards, radar displays, and trajectory monitors, serve metaphorically as reminders of human agency and its limitations. The film employs subtle lighting shifts and visual reframing to communicate psychological and thematic closure without resorting to conventional cinematic resolution. Musical scoring continues to support emotional and thematic closure. Bertelmann transitions from the minimalist pulse-driven motifs of high tension to gentle, ambient textures that underscore reflection and residual emotional weight. Silence, too, is employed deliberately. Pauses allow the audience to absorb the ramifications of events, emphasizing that even in the absence of immediate threat, human cognition and ethical reflection remain active. Soundscapes reinforce the continuity of consequence, the subtle hum of systems, distant alarms no longer active, and the quiet movements of characters collectively evoke a world returning to equilibrium while remaining conscious of its fragility. Dialogue in these sequences is restrained, reflecting the shift from procedural urgency to reflective consideration. Exchanges emphasize moral contemplation, professional assessment, and personal reflection rather than rapid decision-making. Conversations between Walker, Baker, and the President highlight lessons learned, lingering uncertainties, and ethical insight gained from the crisis. Each line is carefully calibrated to convey weight, restraint, and the ongoing tension between system, human agency, and moral responsibility. The dialogue exemplifies Bigelow's commitment to realism. Characters do not oversimplify or idealize experiences, instead, they process and articulate nuanced ethical and psychological truths. Thematically, the resolution sequences crystallize key motifs introduced throughout the film. Deterrence, system fragility, and moral responsibility remain central concerns. The narrative demonstrates that technological systems, while powerful, are fundamentally dependent on human interpretation and ethical oversight. Decisions cannot be divorced from the psychological, emotional, and ethical contexts of those executing them. Bigelow's insistence on ambiguity reinforces the film's reflective ambition. Closure does not imply certainty, nor does it suggest the absence of ongoing moral and operational responsibility. Instead, resolution is framed as a state of cautious equilibrium, achieved through collective human judgment rather than absolute knowledge or infallible procedure. Secondary characters continue to contribute to the thematic resonance of the resolution. Analysts, junior officers, and aides reflect the diversity of human response under sustained stress, from relief to lingering anxiety. Their subtle gestures, conversations, and reflective moments underscore the distributed nature of responsibility and the interdependence of systemic and personal action. The film emphasizes that even individuals not in top positions carry moral and operational weight, reinforcing the broader philosophical argument that complex systems rely on the ethical and procedural integrity of every participant. Cinematography during these sequences emphasizes reflection and thematic closure. Static wide shots contrast with previously kinetic operational sequences, highlighting a transition from urgency to contemplative stasis. Close-ups reveal emotional subtleties, micro-expressions of relief, residual tension, and reflective consideration. Framing situates characters in relation to operational spaces, visually conveying the enduring presence of systemic responsibility even as immediate threats recede. Lighting transitions from harsh fluorescence to softer, ambient tones, reinforcing the thematic shift from crisis to reflection. Symbolic motifs introduced earlier culminate with subtle reinforcement. The missile, while no longer an active threat, remains present metaphorically in visual callbacks, trajectory screens left on standby, countdown timers frozen mid-sequence, and radar readouts remaining illuminated. These objects serve as reminders of persistent uncertainty, the ethical weight of human agency, and the continuous vigilance demanded by existential threats. Personal artifacts, including photographs, personal mementos, and reflective gestures, juxtapose these systemic reminders, emphasizing the interplay between human experience and global-scale responsibility. The film's conclusion resists conventional cinematic closure. Rather than depicting triumph or melodramatic catharsis, Bigelow emphasizes continuity, ethical reflection, and systemic fragility. Characters are left in states of contemplation, aware that crises may recur, and that human judgment, emotion, and ethical awareness remain indispensable. The final sequences reinforce the film's central thesis: global-scale systems, while technologically advanced, are inseparable from human decision-making, moral responsibility, and the ongoing interplay between knowledge, uncertainty, and ethical reflection. The audience is left with a sense of lingering tension, reflective engagement, and philosophical consideration. A House of Dynamite functions not merely as a thriller but as a meditation on human fallibility, ethical responsibility, and the limits of control in a technologically complex, interconnected world. By integrating procedural realism, detailed character arcs, layered symbolism, and ethical interrogation, Bigelow crafts a cinematic experience that is intellectually stimulating, emotionally resonant, and morally provocative. The political and historical context of A House of Dynamite is essential to understanding the stakes of its narrative. The film subtly situates its crisis within a landscape shaped by decades of nuclear diplomacy, global power struggles, and the doctrine of deterrence. While the missile's origin is deliberately ambiguous, the scenario evokes real-world concerns regarding the proliferation of nuclear weapons, geopolitical tensions, and the fragility of communication between nation-states. This deliberate vagueness serves both dramatic and thematic purposes. It heightens suspense and allows the audience to focus on the universal aspects of leadership, ethical decision-making, and human responsibility rather than specific political entities. The film thus functions as a meditation on modern security dynamics, illustrating how the threat of catastrophic events is ever present, and how human decision-making is central to managing, or exacerbating, such threats. Historical precedents, though not explicitly named, are embedded in the narrative framework. References to Cold War-era protocols, nuclear alert systems, and high-level strategic consultations ground the story in recognizable reality. By drawing on the collective consciousness surrounding nuclear crises, the film taps into a shared understanding of existential threat, fear, and the precarious nature of human survival in a technologically advanced but morally complex world. The narrative implicitly critiques the reliance on systems designed for prevention that nonetheless depend upon fallible human actors, underscoring the inherent tension between technological capability and moral responsibility. Moral philosophy is interwoven throughout the narrative, particularly regarding the responsibilities of those in positions of power. Every character is faced with decisions that test the boundaries of ethical reasoning, weighing duty against human empathy, procedural adherence against moral conscience. The looping narrative structure magnifies these dilemmas, revealing the consequences of choices from multiple perspectives and emphasizing the subjective nature of judgment. The film raises profound questions about authority, accountability, and the consequences of action versus inaction, highlighting the ways in which context, perception, and personal bias influence ethical decision-making. By doing so, it challenges audiences to confront uncomfortable truths about the limitations of human judgment and the ethical burdens of leadership. Character psychology is explored in meticulous detail. Olivia Walker embodies the tension between rational analysis and moral intuition, balancing the demands of procedural fidelity with a recognition of human vulnerability. Her inner conflict illustrates how ethical decision-making is rarely straightforward and often entails navigating competing priorities under immense pressure. General Anthony Brady represents a contrasting psychological approach, emphasizing decisiveness and assertive action while wrestling with doubt and the moral weight of potential failure. The president's perspective integrates these conflicting approaches, highlighting the complex interplay between rational deliberation, emotional intelligence, and ethical responsibility. Collectively, the characters' psychological profiles provide a comprehensive exploration of human cognition and emotion in extreme circumstances, reflecting both realism and thematic depth. Narrative pacing contributes significantly to the film's sustained tension. The story unfolds in near real time, with the looming threat of the missile acting as a constant temporal constraint. The repeated perspectives introduce subtle variations in pacing, emphasizing the urgency and gravity of each moment while also providing opportunities for reflection and analysis. The film's careful modulation of tension, combined with overlapping timelines, creates an immersive experience in which the audience is continually engaged, both intellectually and emotionally. This pacing reinforces the narrative's central themes, demonstrating how pressure, uncertainty, and time constraints shape decision-making and human behavior. Critical and cultural comparisons situate A House of Dynamite within the broader landscape of political thrillers. It shares thematic resonance with films that examine high-stakes decision-making, ethical ambiguity, and the human dimensions of national security, yet it distinguishes itself through its combination of technical authenticity, character-driven narrative, and non-linear storytelling. Unlike conventional thrillers that rely predominantly on action or spectacle, Bigelow's film foregrounds psychological realism, moral complexity, and procedural fidelity, resulting in a work that is both intellectually stimulating and emotionally compelling. Its focus on ambiguity and ethical tension aligns it with contemporary discussions about leadership, risk management, and the moral responsibilities of those in power. The audience's reception highlights the effectiveness of these choices. Viewers have praised the film for its realism, narrative innovation, and thought-provoking exploration of ethical and psychological dilemmas. Some critique the ambiguity of the ending, yet this unresolved conclusion reinforces the film's thematic emphasis on uncertainty and moral complexity. By resisting the urge to provide definitive answers, the narrative invites ongoing engagement, discussion, and reflection, demonstrating its capacity to function as both entertainment and a catalyst for ethical and intellectual inquiry. From a production standpoint, the coordination of multiple timelines, intricate set designs, and precise performances presented significant challenges. Bigelow's direction, combined with Aykroyd's cinematography and Baxter's editing, ensured that narrative clarity was maintained despite structural complexity. Actors were required to portray overlapping sequences with consistent emotional continuity while also revealing subtle variations that differentiated each perspective. This demanded meticulous rehearsal, careful blocking, and precise timing, all of which were executed to maintain both narrative coherence and emotional impact. The result is a seamless experience in which the audience is simultaneously engaged with plot, character, and thematic resonance. The film's attention to technical and procedural detail reinforces its credibility. Depictions of command protocols, communication systems, and missile tracking technology are informed by research and expert consultation. These details enhance realism while also contributing to thematic depth, illustrating the interplay between human decision-making, technological capability, and the moral responsibilities inherent in positions of authority. By grounding dramatic tension in realistic operational procedures, the film avoids superficial thrills, instead creating suspense that arises organically from the stakes, characters, and ethical dilemmas presented. In addition to procedural realism, A House of Dynamite emphasizes the psychological and moral consequences of leadership. The narrative repeatedly demonstrates how decisions made under stress are influenced by perception, cognitive bias, and emotional pressure. Characters experience doubt, fear, and moral conflict, highlighting the human dimension of national security decision-making. The film portrays both the potential for error and the necessity of courage, illustrating how leaders must navigate uncertainty while balancing ethical responsibility, professional obligation, and personal conscience. This focus on human psychology elevates the narrative beyond conventional thrillers, offering a sophisticated exploration of leadership, ethics, and existential risk.